Welcome to PastCast. Join us as we dive into the events and lives that shaped our world. Each episode reveals fascinating facts and stories from history. All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling the dancing plague of 1518.
Oh, this is a fascinating one.
Yeah, it is. It is. Hundreds of people in Strasbourg just dancing nonstop.
It really makes you question what we think we know about behavior.
Totally. Like, how could that even happen? Was it medical, social, or just, I don't know, the vibes of the 1500s?
Well, and the sources on this are incredible. We have historical accounts, modern analysis.
A lot to unpack.
Yeah. It really challenges how we think about individual and group behavior. I mean, was it a medical mystery? Or was it a social thing? Or maybe a sign of the times? What do you think?
Okay, so imagine this. July 1518, Strasbourg. It's like crazy hot. Everyone's doing their thing.
Setting the scene.
Yeah, and then Frau Trofea, this is where it all starts, walks into the street and just starts dancing.
Just out of nowhere.
Yeah, but it wasn't like just a little dance. Think more like a full-on frenzy.
It went on for days.
Oh, yeah, days.
And the thing is, she wasn't alone. Within weeks, it just spread like wildfire. We're talking 400 people, all caught up in this crazy dancing fever.
That's a lot of people.
Imagine the scene. Streets packed with people. They're like in a trance, dancing until they literally drop.
I mean, it's almost impossible to picture, like looking back from now, you know?
Totally agree, especially with what we know now about medicine and psychology.
Right. It's easy to just think of this as like some wacky history thing.
Yeah.
But it was serious. People got hurt, bloody feet, dehydration, even died.
Oh, yeah. Some historians even think all the exhaustion and stuff actually made the plague worse.
Wow. How so?
Well, think about it. The more people got hurt, the more it looked like they were cursed, which just made everyone more scared and probably pushed even more people into the frenzy.
So a vicious cycle.
Absolutely.
So what did they do? I mean, the authorities, they tried to stop it.
They did try to stop it, but their first response, it was a little surprising. Instead of stopping the dancing, they encouraged it.
Wait, what? Really?
Yeah. Like they built stages, brought in musicians.
No way.
Even paid dancers to join in, almost like they thought, well, if we just let it run its course, it'll go away.
So that's like the exact opposite of what you'd think they should do.
Right. It's almost like they were adding fuel to the fire.
Do they not know? Like, rest is important.
Well, keep in mind, this was the 1500s. They didn't think about health the way we do now. You know, stress, trauma, mass psychogenic illness. These weren't really concepts back then.
Yeah, that makes sense. So instead of thinking, okay, maybe this is like medical or psychological, they went with what everyone believed in back then.
Which was?
Religion, right.
Exactly. Enter Saint Vitus, the patron saint of dancers.
Oh, the irony.
Yeah, he became a central figure in all of this. People believed he could cause this dancing mania and also cure it.
It's wild how we explain things based on what we believe at the time.
For sure. So, trying to appease St. Vitus, they organized pilgrimages, tons of prayers.
Anything to break the curse.
Exactly. And they even used holy water to paint crosses on their shoes.
It really shows you how much beliefs and culture influence how we see things. Even crazy things like a dancing plague.
Absolutely. I mean, imagine if something like this happened now. How would we react?
Right. Would we immediately think, okay, someone call a doctor, or would we, freak out like they did?
Totally. And it's interesting to think, would we see this kind of thing play out online, like with viral trends or all the anxiety we see these days?
Good point. But back to St. Vitus, I mean, it's kind of ironic, right? The saint of dance blamed for a dancing plague.
Oh, totally. But it makes sense when you think about it. Back then, people were ready to see supernatural stuff everywhere. And a saint, even one linked to dance? Well, he was a perfect explanation for something they just couldn't understand.
Yeah, it's like when you don't know the answer, you fill in the blanks of what you do know.
Exactly.
So while they were busy praying to St. Vitus, there were other ideas floating around too, right? Like, I remember reading about the poison bread theory.
Ah, yes. The ergot theory.
Yeah, like they accidentally ate some fungus that made them hallucinate and convulse.
It's a popular one for sure, but it doesn't really hold up.
Oh. Why not?
Well, ergot poisoning can cause some weird stuff, but it usually doesn't last long.
Right.
And the dancing plague, this went on for weeks, sometimes even months.
Okay, that's true. So if it wasn't a curse or bad bread, what do experts think it was?
Well, the main theory is something called mass psychogenic illness, or sometimes mass hysteria.
Okay, so it was all in their heads.
It's not that simple. There's more to it than that.
All right, break it down for me.
Okay, imagine life in 16th century Strasbourg. It's tough. poverty, disease outbreaks all the time, and religious anxieties on top of everything.
Sounds stressful.
It was. So it's like all this stress, it just built and built until boom, it had to find a way out.
And that way out was dancing.
Exactly. It's like a collective breaking point where the mind and body just latch onto a shared behavior, even if it is a bit unusual.
And it wasn't the first time something like this happened.
Right. You're right. There's records of these dancing manias popping up in Europe for centuries, especially in that region.
Wow. Okay, so stress, religion, mass hysteria, it all played a part.
It seems so. And it really shows you how complex this whole thing is. I mean, we can look back and try to understand, but we can never really know for sure what was going on in their minds and bodies back then.
It's fascinating, but also kind of scary, you know?
Definitely. It makes you think about the power of belief and how it can influence our actions, sometimes in extreme ways.
No kidding. Yeah, it is kind of wild to think like societal stress could make people, I don't know, dance till they drop.
Right. I mean, would they even have seen it as an illness, you think? Or was it just like part of life back then?
That's a good question. Like, did they even have a concept of mental health?
Probably not the way we think about it now. So they might have seen the physical stuff, the exhaustion, the injuries, but the psychological part, probably totally invisible to them.
Yeah, that's true. Makes you think about how much our understanding of, the mind and the body is always changing.
For sure. And, it's funny because sometimes I think about all the stuff we see online today, those viral trends, people doing crazy things for views.
Oh, yeah, like those challenges and stuff.
Right. It makes you wonder if it's kind of similar, like a need to belong, even if it means risking your health or, I don't know, looking foolish.
That's a really interesting connection. But okay, back to the dancing plague. So we've got all these people dancing for days, some are even dying. What happened next? Did they just, suddenly stop?
Well, eventually they did stop, but not before a lot of damage was done. We've talked about the physical stuff, but there's also the mental and emotional impact to think about.
Right, imagine losing control of your body like that for days and not knowing why or when it'll end. That's got to be traumatic, right?
Exactly. I mean, even after it was over, you have to wonder about the long-term effects, both for the individuals and the whole community.
Yeah, heavy stuff. It's a good reminder that even these, weird stories from history, they had real consequences for real people.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just some historical footnote for them. It was their reality, their lives. It must have shaped their whole worldview.
It also makes you appreciate how far we've come in terms of understanding health.
Yeah.
We still have a lot to learn, but at least we can recognize and treat things that they probably thought were curses or, I don't know, demonic possessions.
Totally. It's like a testament to science, always pushing to learn more, understand more.
Okay, so we talked about religion, stress, mass hysteria. But wasn't there another medical explanation? Something about Sydenham's chorea.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's an autoimmune thing that can cause involuntary movements. Sometimes it looks like dancing.
Huh, interesting. But you said earlier it was probably not the main cause, right?
Right, probably not. It's just, given how many people were affected and how long it lasted, Sydenham's chorea by itself doesn't really explain it all.
So it's more like multiple things coming together at once, creating this perfect storm of dancing frenzy.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a historical puzzle, but we're missing some pieces.
But even without all the answers, I think we've learned a lot about the dancing plague and what it tells us about, ourselves.
For sure. It's a window into how people behave individually and in groups, and the power of beliefs, how they can influence us, even to the point of, well, dancing ourselves to death.
It makes you wonder if something like this could happen today.
Yeah.
Maybe not dancing in the streets, but something similar, driven by our modern anxieties and stresses.
Right. Think about how connected we are now. Information's spreading so fast. Sometimes it's true, sometimes not. And then there's all the global crises, the economy, the political stuff. Could all that create a new version of the dancing plague?
Yeah. I mean, we see hints of mass hysteria already, right? Like with all the online rumors and conspiracy theories, or how everyone panicked and bought all the toilet paper when the pandemic started.
Exactly. It shows that even now, with all our technology and progress, we're still vulnerable to the same kind of, I don't know, psychological and social forces that might have been at play back then with the dancing plague.
That's kind of a scary thought, actually.
Yeah, it is. But it's also a reminder to be aware, to think critically, and not just get swept up in whatever everyone else is doing or believing,
Yeah, good point. We like to think we're above all that, but history shows us we're not always as rational as we think we are. Yeah, It is kind of humbling, right? We like to think we're so smart, but history has a way of showing us. Maybe not so much.
For sure. And that's one of the biggest takeaways from the dancing plague, I think. It's a reminder to be a little humble, you know? Question what you think you know and realize there are things, powerful things that can influence us, whether we like it or not.
It's like we think of history as this fixed thing, you
Yeah.
know? But then you look at something like the dancing plague and you realize our understanding of it changes as we learn more.
Totally. It's not just a story in a book. It was a real event
Yeah.
shaped by the beliefs and the society and the knowledge of that time. And as we change, so does how we see the past.
It really makes you think, like, what will people in the future think about us? What will seem crazy or unbelievable to them?
Right. Like maybe they'll look back at our obsession with social media or all the climate change anxiety or even just, I don't know, how divided everything feels politically, and they'll see parallels to the dancing plague.
Maybe they'll be doing a deep dive on us someday.
Maybe. But you know, before we wrap up, I think it's important to acknowledge the biggest thing about this whole dancing plague thing. It's still a mystery.
Yeah, we've talked about a lot of theories, but we still don't know for sure what caused it.
And that's okay. Sometimes the best lessons come from admitting we don't have all the answers.
It's like that saying, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
Exactly. The dancing plague, with all its weirdness and unanswered questions, it's like an invitation to keep being curious, to keep asking questions.
So for anyone listening who wants to know more, definitely check out that book we mentioned, A Time to Dance, A Time to Die, by John Waller. It's like a deep dive into, well, the deep dive.
Yeah, it's a great starting point. And who knows, maybe it'll inspire some of you to do your own research.
Well, that just about wraps it up for us today. This has been quite the journey, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, for sure. History, psychology, the human experience, it's all connected.
And to everyone listening, thanks for coming along for the ride. It just goes to show sometimes the weirdest stories from the past can teach us a lot about who we are today. Thanks for tuning in to PastCast. We hope today's episode sparked your curiosity for history. If you enjoyed it, leave us a review. It helps us reach more history lovers like you. Stay curious and join us next time on PastCast.